If there's one thing beyond doubt after having played well over 100 hours of Dune Awakening, it's that Funcom has done its homework in crafting the most authentic take on the Duneverse imaginable. As a longtime fan of Frank Herbert's iconic sci-fi setting, that's an incredible thing to experience more often than not, and my time on Arrakis has been filled with moments of genuine shock. It's very clever how the harsh environments and empty space are repeatedly used as progression checks, turning what seem like they should be weaknesses into strengths. Other times, that stubborn adherence to established lore results in annoying or just plain boring irritations, like how you're all but forced to adopt a nomadic lifestyle in a genre where putting down your roots and building up your base is one of the fundamentals. There have also been plenty of technical issues and bugs, an endgame that could use a bit of hydration, and combat that never stops being underwhelming. But on balance, my friends and I have had an absolutely awesome time nerding out. If you've ever played a survival game and have read a Dune book or seen the movies before, you'll know most of what you need to feel at home among the giant sandworms. You gather materials from the world, build your own ugly as heck home, and upgrade your equipment to gain access to more dangerous areas with rarer materials. Like plenty of survival games, including Funcom's own Conan Exiles or last year's Once Human, all of this is happening on a server full of similarly sunburnt players in a perpetually online world, where cooperation and limited instances of PvP are both a distinct possibility, and which account for most of its best moments.
Tactical or fanatical, we have the tools to suit your every murder need, my friend.
The story is an interesting twist on the Dune world that takes place in an alternate reality, where Paul Atreides was never born and House Atreides doesn't collapse as a result.
In this other universe, my mother, Lady Jessica, consort to Duke Leto Atreides, gave birth to a daughter, a girl they named Ariste.
It's a smart decision that allows for Awakening's developers to play in the Duneverse without tying themselves to canon events or being obligated to kill off the various fan-favorite characters that the novels dispose of with reckless abandon. The plot is full of lore, familiar faces, and a few compelling twists and turns, but unfortunately, each of those chapters is separated by about a dozen hours of gameplay and grinding that makes it pretty hard to keep track of or enjoy in any comprehensive way.
Because of the forewarning of his betrayal, House Atreides survived the Battle of Arrakis.
Where this game really sets itself apart, though, is by just how much it adheres to its legendary setting, and that has a major impact on just about everything you do. For example, clever use is made of Arrakis' harsh environment, which is weaponized against you quite literally every second you stay within its atmosphere. Standing directly in sunlight unprotected will bake you alive in a matter of seconds, sandstorms blow on a regular basis and will kill you if you aren't able to get to shelter first, and most notably, there's the issue of these pesky, enormous man-eating worms which gobble you up if you dare tread upon their domain for too long. By leaning into the unforgiving world as much as it does, Awakening puts you in a constant battle against the planet itself. So instead of casually trotting around, collecting resources at your leisure, and settling your own little piece of the world, you're frantically ducking behind rocks to avoid the sun's harsh rays and drink what little water you have left, and playing a never-ending game of the floor is lava as you rush from one place to another with a shai-hulud hot on your heels. On the other hand, there are also times where this fanatical adherence to Dune conventions can be quite obnoxious, like how you're encouraged and in some cases required to move your base of operations from place to place as you unlock access to higher level regions. Pulling up stakes means you either have to abandon all you've built up to that point or tediously relocate as much of your equipment as you can piece by piece. Then there's stuff like the fact that guns are often useless, since many enemies make use of the all-important Holtzman shields that completely protect from range attacks. This creates a weird situation where you're juggling back and forth between guns and melee weapons depending on which enemy is currently running towards you, oftentimes having to choose between addressing the swordsman barreling down on you or the guy a few feet behind him with a chain gun, which can create a really oppressive rhythm to combat.
Incoming! Take cover!
That's just part of the reason that, like almost every single one of its peers, Dune Awakening has pretty awful combat. I knew going into a survival MMO that would be the case, but it's still a particularly bitter pill that never gets any easier to swallow. I spent half of my time playing with ranged weapons before switching to a vastly more effective melee build, but both look, well, like this. There are at least some neat little tricks, like Bene Gesserit powers that let you command enemies to stop dead in their tracks for stretches of time, or an anti-gravity grenade that suspends everyone in the air. But very little of this stuff mixes things up enough to make up for the hours of blandness forced upon you, and it never gets much better or varied after 100+ hours of leveling up. Thankfully, the combat miss is more than counterbalanced by the absolutely stellar survival mechanics, which are some of the most thoughtful and polished I've seen in a while. There's a constant stream of new technologies to research, equipment to craft, and material to hunt for with almost no filler or repetitive grind along the way. Every time I collected the right materials to craft the latest shiny thing I wanted, I immediately had another enticing item to chase, and with unique schematics dropping left and right, I was always making interesting decisions on whether to spend my rarest materials on a cool item with special effects versus taking the more conservative route and just crafting common items to save those resources for a rainy day. There are some instances where the exact amount of materials needed to craft something and the time it takes for those recipes to be cooked up are a bit much, especially in the endgame where you can go through ornithopters quite quickly during PvP. But aside from these more extreme late-game examples, the progression is incredibly well-paced. Though it took me over 80 hours to complete the campaign and master the main map of Haga Basin, there's still quite a bit to do once you reach the end of the grind and are inevitably pushed out to the deep desert to begin the endgame. This PvP-heavy zone is the only source of the materials necessary to reach the highest heights currently available in Dune Awakening, and has some really great ideas, like how the Coriolis storm sweeps through each week and destroys everything in its path, leaving behind a new procedurally generated map to explore and fight other players to build settlements on. Unfortunately, those maps are absolutely massive and largely empty, and not in a good way like the Haga Basin. And what structures and shipwrecks there are to explore are mostly carbon copies of one another and almost instantly become a chore to explore. But worse than that is the fact that the main event of the Deep Desert is the PvP experience, which is presently pretty awful, and not just because combat in general isn't great in Awakening. The current meta involves everyone on the map flying around in ornithopters, carpet bombing one another into oblivion as they fight for a small amount of minerals needed for crafting. There's very little in the way of gunplay, and hand-to-hand combat is fairly rare unless you get caught inside a shipwreck or cave, which isn't all that likely when so much of the map is barren dunes. It's a massively unrewarding experience that leaves those without guilds or powerful ships to live under the oppressive regime of their fellow players. If your ornithopter is destroyed in a dogfight, which is fairly likely, then you'll need to haul your defeated butt back to Haga Basin for another few hours of grinding to make a new ship, just for the chance to get your teeth kicked in and your mouth filled with sand all over again. What's hilarious is that even if you're on the winning side of this brutal equation, you're rewarded with basically nothing. since players only drop the loot in their backpack and hang on to the much more valuable items they likely currently have equipped on their person. You're at least able to grab some high-value materials, including the all-important spice, which helps you craft some of the most potent items on Arrakis, but those can also be scavenged from the world if you simply get lucky and swoop in undetected to grab what you need and leave before someone blasts you. It's a meta that simply isn't very fun for either side, and combined with the lack of rewarding things to do, I suspect this underdeveloped part of the Dune journey will be the focus of some serious revamping in the weeks and months to come. Speaking of which, there's still some technical work to be done as well. It's certainly better than it was during the beta, but even as improved as it is, I've had disconnects, seen entire mountains disappear and reappear before my eyes, and even had a few hours where all sandworms just up and deleted themselves from existence, making everyone on the server swarm to the resources normally protected by their constant threat. It's not been the smoothest launch by any stretch, but also far from the worst.
Let the echoes of history remind you.
Dune Awakening is an excellent survival MMO that captures Frank Herbert's sci-fi world incredibly well, mostly to its advantage and occasionally to its detriment. The survival climb from dehydrated peasant to powerful warlord of Arrakis is a joy almost every step of the way, and the story and world building filled this nerd with absolute joy. There's still plenty for Awakening to work on though, as its combat never really hits its stride, the endgame is a bit of a chaotic mess not worth the effort, and there's quite a few technical bugs yet to be squashed. But even these rough patches felt like tiny desert mice next to the leviathan shai-huluds that are this survival game's wonderful successes.
Executive Reviews editor Tom Marks here with Travis Northup. Once again, Travis, if you don't know, is our most prolific reviewer at IGN, reviews the most stuff more than anybody else, including Aloft, Satisfactory, Pal World, Lord of the Rings, Return to Moria, a bunch of survival games. I feel like the last couple times we've had you on to chat, it's been about cozy life sim sort of things. And now we're going into the dunes, quite literally. Let's talk about Dune Awakening. Why'd you want to review this one?
Yes, well, I am a nerd. I'm sure that is not surprising given my everything about me. So I, like a lot of nerds, I grew up reading Frank Herbert's iconic sci-fi novel Dune, and the books that followed it, which get progressively weirder. But I obviously am a big Dune guy. I've also loved the movies, and it's been a couple years since I have really dabbled in that universe, but it's like riding a bike. You get in there and you're like, oh yeah, we got worms, we got politics, we got super greedy folks stabbing each other in the back. Very cool stuff that we all want to see. I'm also the person that was willing to spend a couple 100 hours reviewing this game, so that helps.
Let's talk about your survival game taste specifically. It's cool that you have a history with Dune as a series, but what are some of your favorite survival games out there? What do you look for in a survival game? What do you like about them?
I think my favorite survival game of all time is Minecraft, which is kind of no surprise. To me, it's the best game of all time. And it's also one of the first survival games that really got me hooked to the genre. I would have been in college when that was in beta. And I don't think I even really understood what a survival game was or why those games could be fun. I remember distinctly playing Minecraft for 10 hours and being like, why am I playing this game? I don't understand what the end game is. I don't know why I'm building a house. What's the goal here? I was just very confused. When you're used to playing the linear games, that can happen. But then somewhere between hour 10 and 11, something clicked and I got it. And I was building minecart rails all up and down the world. And I was just like, okay, I get it. And I've just basically been a survival game simp ever since. So some of my favorites, Grounded, which I'm very excited about the announcement of Grounded 2, by the way. Grounded, I got to review maybe 2 years ago or whenever it was it came out. Absolutely fell in love with that game. I'm a really big fan of Subnautica. That's a really good game, I think, kind of underrated. I also reviewed for IGN Pal World, which is a fantastic survival game. No Man's Sky is really good right now. I did our re-review for that. I think our third review of No Man's Sky, because that game has changed a lot. And then, some of the other ones that are less about base building and more about resource gathering and crafting, State of Decay and State of Decay 2. I also played Conan Exiles, which is important to this review because it's made by the same developer, Funcom, and this is very much like their next kind of their evolution of the ideas and the stuff that they learned in that game. One
of the things that strikes me about the games you just listed is, No Man's Sky is so different than Subnautica, is so different than Conan, it's so different than Rust, right? Survival game as a genre is this very broad term in a lot of ways where it's like, when you see it, they have these similarities, but they can be so many different things. So what part of that formula appeals to you the most? Do you really want a survival game to have that base building aspect to it? Do you want it to have the challenge of surviving in the dark? Do you want it to just be a cool map you can explore? Like, what is the part that you would want to be the most focused on, I guess, in your ideal survival game?
I think maybe the reason that survival games click with me is that there's not a lot of uniformity to how they work. Like, as you mentioned, like a lot of them are kind of different. And so when you enter a survival game, you're kind of, at least myself, I'm like really curious about like how they're going to sell me on wanting to play this game for 100 hours. Like, what is going to be their hook? And it's sort of different in every game, because I wouldn't say that like Grounded's base building is like the reason I stuck with that. That one was weirdly more like the unique idea, the premise of being shrunken, and also the story, which like story is very rarely the reason you stick around for a survival game. In Minecraft, it's like the freedom and creativity and the stuff you can build and the RPG components of that game that are kind of hidden. It's like little secrets and mysteries and stuff like that. And then you do something like Subnautica, and it's just like a completely different type of game. And so there's kind of like a level of like surprise where it's just like, I get the basics, like I'm going to have to craft things, and it's going to have kind of that scaling where it's like, all right, I crafted this thing, so now I can do this higher tier thing I wasn't able to do before, which lets me craft this thing. And it sort of gets you into this like really addictive like chain of building and improving your, whether it's your base or your loadout or whatever. It kind of does those familiar beats, but the way that individual games augment that take on it is sort of unique.
Last question real quick, gun to your head. If you had to only ever play survival games alone or only ever play them with a squad going forward, which would you pick, solo or more multiplayer?
Pretty easy answer, which is a multiplayer. Not only because they're just more fun with other players, but also usually I would say 99 times out of 100 in a survival game, if you're playing multiplayer and you simply want alone time, you can just go somewhere else and not interact with anyone. Like, you can be a hermit in a survival game. And even when like I've been playing Dune Awakening a ton, almost always in party chat, almost always in a party in the game. And I've probably spent 80% of the time in my own house or doing my own things and not seeing any of the people I'm in a party with. And so you can choose to just kind of, go your own way. So yeah, I would say more people around is never a bad thing. You can only improve your situation.
Well, Travis, thank you so much for chatting with us a little bit more about your tastes, about Dune, all of that good stuff. If you want another conversation between me and Travis, his last review was Lies of P Overture, that DLC that came out for Lies of P. And if you want a different sort of game that's maybe not as glowing of a recommendation, we just reviewed Mind's Eye, so you can check that out as well. And for everything else, keep it right here on IGN.